Good evening and welcome to Looking Within, Nurturing Mental Health in the Face of Ongoing Violence. Tonight we have a wonderful panel to help us talk about the recent mass violence incidents, how they impact us individually as well as our community. This month is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we know across our country mass violence incidents continue to wreak havoc in our communities. And they impact us on an individual level as well as a community level. And they especially impact the survivors of previous trauma, and especially our 1 October survivors here. So our panelists this evening, I will introduce first Jackie Harris. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist with Creative Solutions Counseling Center. She also is the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center's main behavioral health consultant. She has worked with us extensively since the beginning of the Resiliency Center. And then we have Margarita Romano. She is a licensed clinical social worker. She too has worked with the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center providing services and specifically to all of our Spanish-speaking survivors and families since the incident happened. And then a very special welcome to our survivor, our very own Route 91 survivor, Nadine, I'm going to say this wrong, Lusmoeller. And interestingly enough, she has chosen to start studying psychology because of some of her experiences. And I'll later on let her go into that in more detail. But first, I would like to kind of talk about how we will do this panel tonight. So we're going to be going over some of the impacts and what people can look for in themselves, what they can expect, how it impacts our community and specific groups in our community. We'll also be providing resources that are available and some very helpful coping ideas and techniques that each one of us can use. And then we will go to a question and answer session. This will be the time and opportunity for you out there to ask your questions. But I would like to point out that our focus tonight is really on our coping and our mental health, and not so much the preventative side of mass violence. So first, I'm going to turn to you, Jackie. How do the recent events and news impact us individually, our families, and our communities?
I think one of the first ways that it really impacts us, particularly when we have an incident of mass violence in our own community, is it really shapes our feeling of safety. Safety is at the core for many of us. We really do feel walking around, most of us in our day-to-day life, that, oh, okay, we're pretty safe. And when something happens in our community and it's very unexpected, and like with Route 91, it happens at a place and a time when you're not expecting it. You're there to celebrate, you're there to enjoy. The challenge is that it really does shape your core foundation of safety. One of the things that I've been hearing from folks who were at Route 91 is with more community violence occurring in our own community as well as across the nation, it can bring them back to their own incident, their own experience, as if it just happened. It can also, they can identify. I spoke with someone today who said, every time I hear of a new event, I know what those families are experiencing. I know what those people experienced when that happened. And so it kind of transports us backwards in many ways. And it also shapes our feeling of safety in the future. It makes us anxious for what could happen in the future, where we're at, where we're going, and how we can be safe.
What are some common signs or symptoms? Like, what should people be looking for in themselves to know that they are being impacted. Because I know from personal experience, you don't always recognize why you're feeling the way that you feel, or even that it, tie it to the incident or what's going on. So what are some things that people should be looking for?
Sure, that's a good question. I think one of the things that, again, going back to that feeling of safety, is you can feel very anxious or fearful, worried. I know that even for myself, and I do this work every day. When a recent event happened, it was on a weekend, and I was going, let's say, to a movie theater with family. Before I went in, it did flash in my mind. I thought, okay, this is a reality. And then I needed to sort of do some self-talk. That's a really good coping mechanism to say, okay, why am I safe? Why am I safe in this moment? What is the likelihood of this happening? And so I think anxiety, fear, and worry are the most common things that we see. Some folks, depending on how they're being impacted, can have trouble sleeping. They may be a little more irritable. And they may worry, in particular, if they have children they're sending. I know the school year just ended. For a lot of parents, this has been a very anxious time as the school year was coming to a close, or going to a public event, or going out, somewhere where there's crowds. So just being mindful and thinking about what are the things in this moment right now today that are keeping me safe.
Great advice, Jackie. Thank you for that. How do we know when our own personal coping techniques or the skills that we've been using are not effective? Like when should we reach out for additional help?
That's a really good question. One of the things, even as a therapist, therapy and seeking professional help is not the only answer. For some folks, it's seeking out, just talking to a friend, just connecting with other people, reaching out to your spiritual, supports. Also, I know for me, one of my greatest coping skills is nature. I just love, being out, whether it's sitting, and looking at the night sky, or, taking a hike, taking a walk, walking around in the grass with your shoes off. It can be very helpful. But when somebody we really think needs or might benefit from professional help is when your symptoms are interfering with your ability to function. For example, your stress, your fear, your anxiety is at such a level that you're having trouble going to school or work, or you're not sleeping for, quite a long period of time, or you're having irritability and it's interfering with relationships. That may be a time when your general coping skills may not be enough. And so seeking out possibly professional help, talking to your physician, can be something that would be warranted at that time.
Thank you, Jackie. I know one thing that we work on at the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center is trying to break down stigmas.
Yes.
And trying to normalize some of these things. What would be your advice for someone who is really struggling? They know they need help, but they're not really sure how to get started.
I think one of the things to understand is I would agree that stigma is one of the biggest barriers to folks seeking out mental health or behavioral health assistance. We really, all of us in our community and everywhere, not just us therapists, have a responsibility to normalize it. It is okay to seek help. It is okay to ask for assistance and resources. And so depending on what your particular circumstance is, insurance covers a lot of counseling these days. And so you may want to start with your general practitioner or reach out to your insurance company. There's even folks who, on their work insurance plans, they get a certain amount of mental health care for free, which is fabulous. And So there's been a lot of changes over the last many years in just accessibility and care and making sure that it is okay to not be okay. It is okay to reach out for help. We would do that, if we had a broken foot, we would run to the doctor. So it's okay to go also if your emotions are feeling in need of help to reach out and get that help when you need it.
Yes, thank you, Jackie. That's such an important message. And especially, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's a topic for the month, but it really should be a topic year-round. And so that's just a really important message. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Margarita, why don't we move to you?
Okay. Thank you, Jackie.
I know that, within the Latinx community, there are some, different dynamics and different challenges that they face that can, put some added layers in these issues. So, how does violence disproportionately affect the Latinx community?
Yes, that's a very good question. It definitely violence affects all of us in many ways, but particularly the Hispanic or the Latinx community, because there's so many layers that we might not think about it when we're working with Latinx community or Hispanic community. First of all, the community that might be diverse or be very fearful back in our countries, the law enforcement is not very trusty. So they come here and they're very scared to ask for help. So just that barrier of not knowing if it's okay for me to ask for help, or even though to allow myself to ask for help, it already kind of affects the family of not reaching out ever. It's a lot of secrets in the family that as community, as Hispanic community, it's hard to break those stigmas that Jackie and you were discussing previously. It's very important that we start normalizing it's okay not to be okay. Also, in our Latinx community, it's a lot of difference when you work with first generation than when you work with second generation or third generation. First generation come with our countries of origin with some cultural, some social values, some ideas, some cultural practices that might not get along in this country. So, and they might be also scared, they want to be under the radar, they don't want to, cause any trouble. It's a lot of like that pride that I don't come here to take anything away from anybody. I come here to work, I come here to help. But at the same time, the second generation, the children from that generation that is born here, that is growing here, they don't feel connected with the country of origin of their families, but also they don't feel 100% they belong here. So there's an acculturation stress within the family, as also when it's a mixed immigration status within the family. Some deserve and some get help that others don't qualify for the help. So there's so many layers about helping access to resource, language barriers. Within the family, the first generation mostly speaks Spanish, where the children are living, growing here. So maybe the oldest child is the translator between the younger siblings and the parents. So there's already a disconnection. Adding to that, all the violence that is happening in our country, when you don't have access to care or you don't have access to resources, there's no language or there's some language barriers. Additionally to all the past trauma that they come from the countries of origin, it's a combination of so many factors that our Hispanic families are living in fear, in pain, and trauma responders, trauma survivors, hypervigilant, hyperalert, scared, and difficulty trespassing those barriers of asking for help.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot of different dynamics, and there's also a number of layers of trauma. So it sounds
It definitely
Very
requires,
challenging.
it's very challenging. It's not enough of us. It's not enough of providers. We need help to provide more help to our community. And we need to be understanding, empathetic, non-judgmental. When we work with anybody, but especially with the minority groups that are going through so much pain and suffering.
It kind of leads me into another topic about cultural competency.
Yes.
And, sometimes finding the right therapist can take some time. But when you have all of these other cultural dynamics and stuff going on, seems like it would be even more challenging. Is there language access or, helps with communication and different things, or, a way to identify therapists that are culturally competent for these individuals?
Yes, that's also a very good question, and it's I'm gonna give kind of different answers because it's like a very also complex question. So when you ask for help, is it important that we normalize it's okay to ask for help? And when you do ask for help, sometimes you don't feel connected right away with the first therapist that you start working with. So it's okay to ask to change your therapist. So sometimes we are scared of saying, maybe therapy is not for me, but not necessarily. Maybe that therapist and you were not the right fit, or maybe the therapist approach is not what you're looking for. There are many different options of providing therapy. It's like going to the doctor. Sometimes you feel more connected with your doctor, with your physician, and sometimes you don't. So just by starting that, no matter what cultural background you're coming from, it's important that you speak up for yourself, to advocate for yourself, and you feel connected with the therapist that you're working with. Also, consistency. Some people tell me, I went to therapy and it didn't work. It's not for me. And I was like, okay, and how many times do you go? And you went, like 1 or 2. And I was like, yeah. Sometimes I also start a gym and I go 1 or 2 times. It doesn't work. So consistency is very important in your treatment. You have to really take responsibility, take action when you are receiving or when you're going under a treatment. Now, talking about that cultural competency that you were asking me before, we are very lucky at Vegas Strong. Vegas Strong Resiliency Center has so many resources, guys. If you are Group 91 survivor, there's free therapy for you, for your family, for first responders. And also, Fuente de Vida, it's an organization that actually was born in 2021 as part of providing services to Group 91 survivors and families in Espanol, for the Hispanic community. So we are very huge in providing cultural competency, cultural humility to our Hispanic families, that they feel comfortable, that they receive the services in their primary language, and that they feel comfortable. We also have a program called Familia Adelante, or Family Forward, that is a program, it's a prevention program to create awareness within the Hispanic family. As I was speaking before, the first generation, second generation, third generation, it's this program from Vida that helps to break those stigmas, to remove those barriers within the family, to talk about mental health in general, to talk about suicidal prevention, drug addiction prevention, teen pregnancy prevention, responsible sex education in our Hispanic community. Unfortunately, Nevada is one of the highest numbers for teen pregnancy, and specifically for Hispanic Latinas. Suicidal attempts, Hispanic Latinas are a very high number. In our schools, they're very scared of going to school because of all these threats of mass shooting. And maybe a couple of years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, we were like, that's never gonna happen. But now we know that it has happened, and it can happen at any time, and we live under fear and scared, like living with, like you said before, like something that is right there, that it could attack you, and it could be very scary at any time. So let's all take all responsibility by taking care of each of us, protecting our community, by being responsible of yourself, your family, ask for help, it's okay. The more we understand that we can go to the doctor to take care of our medical or physical, it's okay to also check in your mental health.
Thank you so much. It's such an important point. These services are vital, and they're so important. And it is really important that we have the different programming that works for the different groups and where they are in their circumstances. And so, I'm very grateful to your team for the work that you've done in the Hispanic community and pushing that needle forward, because no one should have to suffer alone. So I'm grateful to you guys.
Happy to be here. From Fuente de Vida, everybody, our team is very grateful to be serving the community.
So why don't we talk, Jackie and Margarita, about some strategies to nurture our mental health in the face of mass violence.
Okay. We talk a lot in our field about self-care. And I think that's vital for all of us. We particularly see the need for self-care for folks that, are certainly on the front lines, our emergency responders, therapists, teachers, school personnel. We all need to be very aware of that. The thing that we need to understand is what that means is very individualized for everybody. I talked a little bit earlier about coping skills. I always think about positive, neutral, and negative coping skills. Positive coping skills are obviously anything that, to me, moves us toward growth. I think of reading a book about, understanding ourselves. Reading a book about, working on art, music, anything that really contributes positively. I also think about neutral coping skills, things that don't hurt me or hurt anybody else. Like, I love binge watching. I figured that out during the pandemic. I think we all did. Things like that are okay to do, but they may not grow you in any way. And of course, there's negative coping skills. I always think about that as something that has the potential to hurt ourselves or somebody else. We think of addiction. We think of other kinds of negative coping skills. And just being mindful of what we're doing, to nurture our mental health, to take care of ourselves, and again, be aware and feel your feelings.
Thank you. What are some tips for managing kind of those overwhelming feelings?
Yes, well, first of all, to identify them. Because sometimes we're so used to asking, how are you? And we say, fine, like a automatic response. So just take a few seconds to, first of all, get to know yourself. Identify what is exactly that you're feeling. And now knowing what you're feeling, everybody is different and we respond differently to different approaches. So like Jackie was saying, take some time to do that self-care, talk to a friend, spend quality time with your loved ones. Do something that makes you happy, like a hobby or exercise, maybe planning small goals and also long-term goals to have some motivation for your future. And let me kind of think more of the ways, but it's like so many ways that you can take care of yourself. But basically, identify what is it that you're going through so you can see what is the help that you're gonna do to yourself. Have good sleep, eat well, all the same things that doctors recommend for the physical health, it affects also the mental health and vice versa. And always, I recommend the seeking of professional help. It's very important.
Checking in with ourselves and making sure we have these healthy coping skills and tools and kind of habits built into our daily life are so important. What about our loved ones? Are there things that we should be watching for in our loved ones, our family and friends? Every time there is a school mass incident, I have all of these emotions and feelings, but then I think about my own children because we know they're seeing what's out there, and especially our older youth, they are really seeing it and kind of inundated on social media with that, as well as just the regular violence that's in our schools. So what are some things that we can do to help nurture these habits or coping techniques in our loved ones?
I think one of the best things that I like to do is just kind of use a general question. You know, I might call up a family member, particularly those, again, with children in school, and say, gosh, there's been a lot going on in the world. How are you doing? How are the kids doing? And it just opens the door. I don't necessarily have to speak of the specifics or get into details, but just there is a lot going on. How are you doing? In my practice, I work with a lot of youth, and they are experiencing a lot. They have a lot of concerns, and just listening. I know when my son was a teenager, one of the best ways to get him to talk is go on a drive, because they're not, kids are not looking at you, you're not staring them down and saying, tell me how you feel, but gosh, there seems like a lot going on. What's going on? How's your school doing? What are you hearing? What are you concerned about? What helps you? It's also good to talk about what helps. Is there anything I can do? Because we always think we know what somebody else needs. When somebody else might be experiencing some stress or distress, it's great to say, what helps you? What makes you feel good? For some folks, it might be cooking a meal together, sitting down and playing a video game together, or listening to their favorite music, we're a board game family. So, let's sit down and play board games. Doing some art together, taking a walk, being in nature. All those things are a good time to connect and just say, a lot going on, how you doing?
That's such a great piece of advice, because it also helps kind of normalize not being okay, right?
Yes.
When we're asking one another, we're checking in with one another on how people are feeling, and it's not I'm good, oh, I'm great.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. How are you? Yeah.
Right, but it's a real conversation.
Yeah.
And kind of breaking down those barriers.
Sure.
And making a safe space to not be okay
Mm-hmm.
and have a conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Such good advice.
And also, I'm adding a little bit onto that. It's very difficult. We need that loved ones or other people feedback. It's like we need a mirror to look ourselves. We need other people. Sometimes our loved ones will really notice more when something is going on with us, and sometimes it's hard for us to realize that. So giving that loved ones that opportunity of like, like Jackie was saying, I noticed this change of this, or I noticed you being a little bit more quiet today, is everything okay? Just by somebody, like you said, checking in, it helps to help you look at yourself. So the loved ones is very important to have that feedback in your life.
Such good advice. I think one of the biggest things that I've personally learned in doing the work with Route 91 survivors and families is I've learned to voice what I need. There are many days that I'll come home and, they'll ask, how was your day? I need some time. And my husband will say, okay, and he will close the door and he will tell all of my children, do not bother mom.
That's very good.
That's a good husband.
Again, I think just normalizing that it's okay,
Yeah.
Mom needs some time, and that's 100% okay. We
Absolutely.
can have these conversations and support one another.
I have a very good friend, she's here, and she always says that I need that me time. So that's very important, to give yourself that time to decompress, debrief, whatever is going on, to give yourself or allow yourself to do your own unwind in whatever best way, all those coping skills that we have been mentioning before, whatever works for you. Everybody's different, so don't compete what is better for others, that might be the same for you. Absolutely.
There's another topic that I wanted to kind of get into tonight as well. And you mentioned earlier our emergency responders. And I think for tonight's discussion, I'd like to call them community responders, because there's so many different vocations or individuals that end up responding to a mass incident, really any type of violent incident. So I know there's some, very kind of, their circumstances are different, and there's some unique challenges when we're working with that community, and in particular with kind of that compounded trauma. I wonder if, Margarita, you could kind of explain that to us.
Of course, there are many different types of trauma. Simple trauma or an acute trauma is when one single episode something to you, like a car accident or even a crime that you were victim of one single episode. And there's also chronic trauma when throughout your life, let's give an example as domestic violence, you have gone through the similar type of trauma but multiple experiences on the same team. And then there's compound trauma or complex trauma when you have, let's say, a traumatic car accident and also you are a domestic violence survivor and you are also a mass shooting survivor, and additionally, a family member also tried to. So you have multiple types of trauma that affect your brain in multiple levels. It changes, actually, there's a lot of research how much it changes your neural connections and how you respond. You're not the same. We also have our veterans that they said they're not the same before the service and after the service. It definitely changed how we see the world, how we respond to it. And sometimes we need to remember that our brain has been injured with invisible scars. And we are not aware of them all of the time. We can respond inappropriately sometimes, we can be hypervigilant sometimes, we can be not stop moving, doing a lot of activities. I'm also guilty of that. Sometimes I'm always busy. There can affect us in multiple ways. Now, there's also secondary trauma. When a loved one experiences a traumatic event, it could be as same as traumatic for yourself. And also secondary trauma is actually for first responders that witness so many people in pain and so many different stories that has affected themselves, and they have trauma as secondary hand. At the end, no matter what type of trauma you have, trauma is trauma. And we talked about this earlier. You can drain from the ocean. You can actually drown. Sorry, English is my second language. Or you can also drown in a pool. At the end, even there was more amount of water, the result was the same. So don't compare yourself and your own wounds to anybody else. Everybody is individual, is unique, and we all go through different times in our life. Life is about different cycles, different episodes, different circumstances, and we can be vulnerable in many different ways. And at the same time, that's why we talk about all these mental health topics, to take care of yourself. And sometimes you can go through so many traumas in your life and be very resilient, and then maybe your pet died and that was the last drop that you needed to have a mental health breakdown. So just be patient and be kind to yourself.
That's such a good point, because we do interact with a number of emergency responders and mental health providers and people in our hospitals that really are kind of sitting with the people that have been directly traumatized, but they do feel it, and they do kind of soak up some of this trauma, but they often feel like they're not the ones that need the help. And as a community, it's really important that we take care of them because they take care of us.
Yes.
Right? And it's kind of circle of resilience. If we are going to have resilient communities, we really have to take care of our community responders. So it's a very good point. Thank you for that. I'd like to go to Nadine. You know, Nadine is our survivor here tonight, and really speaking from firsthand knowledge. Nadine has done a lot of work on her own healing, and she's very inspirational of how far she has come. And I know she has some, you know, skills and techniques that she uses, you know, in her life. And I especially like that Nadine has decided to go study psychology now, based on some of her experiences, whether they were positive or negative in regards to trying to find, you know, the mental health services and support that she needed. So, you know, Nadine, why don't you discuss kind of the goal of living a full life, and living with the trauma?
You know, there was a U.S. psychologist in the 50s, Romano. He said that there are two ways of dealing with fear. One is avoiding it, and one, but there's a third one, and that is accepting it. And what I learned, or what I experienced for myself, is, you know, all of the people that go out there, do mass shootings, or face threats to schools, or face threats to office buildings, whatever it might be, they feel empowered when they see people in fear. And we, as the people who experience this, have the choice. Do I want this fear in my life? Do I let this fear control my life? Or do I go out there and say, now more than ever, and live my life to the fullest? And that is what's very important. And I decided for myself, I do not let that shooter that took so much away from all of us that night on 1 October in 2017, I do not let him dictate my life. And I said, okay, I had this period of time where I was really struggling, but I am now in a place where I can say, I want to live my life to the fullest, because this is not over yet. And you know, like I said, he took so much away from all of us, but I did not let him take away my love for life and my love for music. I, for example, went out and went to 58 concerts for the 58 people who died that night. And by now, almost 6 years later, I'm at over 100. And I think that is very important, that we pick and choose our battles. Do we let that fear control our life, or do we move on?
That is really, really inspiring. And I have to tell you that I am so inspired by the Routers. You guys really do live your life to the fullest. I think you guys live your life to the fullest, more fully even after what has happened than many of us live normally. You guys inspire me every day, so thank you for sharing that. You know, how do you think how has been kind of the interaction or the support from the community? How has that been for you?
I think the community is very important. We as humans were not made to struggle with things like that on our own. We were meant to be in a community and survive. So what I have seen is that the community of we call ourselves the Routers, they understand you. We may not all be on the same level of healing, but that makes us even stronger because we learn from each other. Somebody that may be 10 steps ahead of me may give me advice and tell me, hey, I did it this way. And that's what makes the community even stronger because we learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center has a peer support program. Has that been a piece of your kind of healing journey?
I have online support groups that are there. Jackie is one of the facilitators. So I may not be at the point anymore where I need the most help, but I am now there helping others, and that's so valuable and so important, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's great. I love to hear those stories of you guys supporting one another. Something was very interesting right after the shooting happened is so many of you kind of flooded social media just looking for that connection, because who else on this planet can really understand what you guys faced and kind of the challenges that you've had since. And you guys always gravitated towards supporting and helping one another and connecting with one another. And I think that that connection has really been instrumental with so many of you and your healing. So I just thank you for sharing that. What is some of the advice that you have for survivors of, you know, maybe Route 91, but maybe also other crimes?
You know, advice is always hard to give because everybody's different. What worked for me may not work for the next person. And it is very important to understand that healing is painful and there's no shortcut. So you have to give yourself the time to heal and do the steps that work for you, and do not give up. That is very important. You know, there is no getting over it, but you can learn to live with it, and you have to understand that there's always hope. You just have to reach out. And like I said earlier, you know, humans were not made to deal with this on our own. We have to heal as a community. Or if it's just, you know, two people, if you're going to see a therapist who can help you, that can be the first step, or just talking to a friend who may be able to give you a little bit of advice. That can be the first step for you to get to the healing that you need.
You know, you brought up such an important piece of, you know, the connecting with the community, and that you don't get over it. I've had many routers call in and say, you know, my family, I can't talk to my family anymore. They tell me I should be over it. Or we've had employers like make comments that were kind of cringeworthy. Why, you know, when are you going to get over this? Or aren't you over this already? I've had community members say, aren't we over this? And I really think there's a lot about, you know, to go on the education piece and educating, you know, others that have never dealt with anything like this, that we really don't get over it. You're right, we have to go through it, and it's about living or thriving with it. And you know, so many of you have been able to do that, but like you said, it's not an easy process. It's a lot of hard work, and I know that you have done a lot of that hard work. What are some of the kind of coping techniques or things that you do in the moment to help you over some of those tougher times?
I have to say that in the beginning, I had no idea how to even deal with all of this. It took me a long time to really get to the point where I was accepting of what can help me. I now have a really great therapist who taught me meditation, breathing techniques. I do photography. I go out in nature, either with my dog or I'm out on a paddleboard on Lake Mead to be in nature, because all of those things, they get you out of your head and let you be in the moment and focus on what's around you in that moment, which is mindfulness. And when you stay in that mindfulness, you do not go down that rabbit hole that can be very dangerous and very unhealthy for you. So you always have to find ways to stay in the moment, and those things are very helpful for me.
Great, thank you so much. So kind of my last question for you is why you decided to go into psychology?
So after the shooting, I found out that it was very difficult to find a therapist who really understood trauma. Everybody learns about it in school when they study it, they read about it in books, they hear lectures about it. But understanding it on a personal level is a completely different story. And I had trouble with working with someone who did not understand what I was going through. There were some comments, some remarks where I was like, this is not working for me. I took a break and then found somebody else who I'm with still today. But I decided I want to make a difference. I want to be the exception of what I experienced when I tried to find somebody out there. I want to be there for someone who experienced trauma, and I want to give that understanding that they really need in that moment. And I think, I went through so much, but I want to show people that there is a way to get out of this. You have to find your purpose, and I found my purpose, and that's psychology.
That is so inspirational and amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. It really draws back that, we each have a responsibility to ourselves and to our mental health. But as a community, we have responsibilities to one another. And that means having resources in place and having the conversations and the education on these issues so that we are a resilient community. I want to make sure that I put out there, and this is always my plug, that the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center does have a lot of resources, and you're absolutely right on the trauma front. It is not the same as regular family therapy or individual therapy. That trauma aspect is different, and it really is important that as a community we have the resources to help people that are dealing with trauma so that they can heal and it doesn't end up being a cycle within our community. So the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center, for those that you don't know, is a resource and referral hub. It was established in the wake of the 1 October shooting, and it was funded through a anti-terrorism grant through the Office for Victims of Crime. It's under the Justice Department. And we have been able to use the funds that came to our community to really develop and bolster programs and resources that help deal with trauma. And, that's a positive, at least, that has come out of this. I do believe that our community is more resilient, but I also believe that we still have a ways to go. But, providers doing the work that you guys do, survivors surviving and thriving and passing that forward. These are the pieces that will make our community resilient and able to deal with these events. So thank you for sharing your insight tonight. I think we'll go ahead and go to some Q&A if we have any questions. I do believe we can answer the questions online as well, correct?
Correct.
So if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in. We'd love to answer. You got a wealth of information here tonight.
So for any parents that are watching this, is there any way that is the best way to talk to your children, since you comment, so in short, is there 3 main points that you could mention of how to talk to children about mass shootings or school shootings?
Validate your kids' feelings. Believe them. Don't question them. Don't minimize them. Validate how they feel. And like Jackie said, age appropriate. But it is better that they hear it from you than they have a misinformation outside. It's better that they hear information from a trusted adult because they're gonna hear it anyways. They're gonna find out, and it's better they can feel safe also to talk to you as their parents.
Great information and advice, thank you.
Where can people get more resources? Where can they go or visit for these resources for the VSRC?
So Vegas Strong .org, and we have some different resource tabs on there. We even have one for our emergency responders. There's specific resources for them, but we have a whole list of resources, also information if you are a loved one or in crisis. There's the crisis hotlines on there as well.
Are those resources in Spanish as well?
Yes, absolutely, because we recognize that we do have a large Spanish-speaking population here, and like I said, we want to make sure everyone in our community has connection to resources. Any more questions? All right, well, I think that concludes our program for tonight. I want to thank everyone that attended and everyone that participated. Especially want to thank our and Nadine, thank you so much. That it's not always easy to kind of come in such a public way, but we are very grateful to you, so thank you. Okay.
And thank you for the backstage and our media. Thank you, because they have been very kind in helping us and guiding us so you guys can see it online. Thank you, and our media team.
Absolutely. So thank you all and good night.